I'm back, etc. So we are now officially entering the year of 2006. But before we all collectively start rocking out to the All-American Rejects, we need to have some setup. We have 6 new villains that are way too big to fit in frame. These barbed wire fences with dental plans are known as the Piraka. And for the first time in kind of ever, we don't have horde villains. All the villains we've had so far, the Borok, the Vaki, the Vizorak, even the Rakshi and the Borok Kal to a certain extent, they've all been part of a larger horde. This is different. These are actual, distinct, individual, free-thinking characters. Sigma males, if you will. Their names are Haken, Vizok, Thok, Radak, Zaktan, and Avak. Now, in order to understand the villains' motivations when they enter this brand new setting, we have to understand their backstories. And I think you already know where I'm going with this. In order to do that, we're gonna have to flash back. But not just 1,000 years, 7,000 years! Oh, we're back in the present! Psych, you thought! We back and we vibing. So we get to know this group as the Piraka, however, that is not their species name. The species is known as Skakti, and they hail from the island of Zakaz. They used to be pretty chill, but then this guy named Spiria showed up and gave them a bunch of superpowers because he realized that they had potential to serve the Brotherhood of Makuta. But instead of them becoming a well-trained army, they ended up all just kind of fighting with each other and becoming tribalist, violent assholes. It's kind of like when the Solarians uplifted the Krogan in Mass Effect, except the Krogan also have laser eyes and, like, fuck you powerful abilities. We will get to that, though. For now, let's begin with Haken and Vizok. 7,000 years ago, these two incredibly cunning master thieves were about to rob a Toa tower, which is essentially a fortress in which Toa store incredibly valuable shit. Vizok is all set to escape with a MacGuffin and let Haken get the shit beat out of him by the Toa. But on his way out, he's taken out by a motherfucker called Ancient, the second in command to the Shadowed One. Shit's about to get real. Alright. Haken and Vizok are brought in front of the Shadowed One. His first question is regarding the MacGuffin, as in, how the fuck did you know about this? As it turns out, Haken actually knew about the MacGuffin from another Dark Hunter. It's not quite clear how, but let's assume torture. The Shadowed One doesn't give a fuck. He just murders the motherfucker in cold blood for being a traitor. He then says to his 2 new friends in no uncertain terms, "You guys are good thieves. We have new vacancy. You work for me now." And like, what are you gonna do, I guess? As sleazy, selfishly minded individuals, they fit into the organization quite well. And they managed to meet some other Skakti. Thok was recruited into the organization after he tried to steal from the organization. Avak was a prison guard who was holding a Dark Hunter prisoner, and the Shadowed One just thought he was pretty cool. Radak committed genocide, and Zaktan was basically a slave in a prison colony. He ends up assuming a leadership position in this group because he's the one with the most pent-up rage, which becomes less and less pent-up as time goes on. A boy's missing a foot. So I think it's time we talked about how fuck you powerful the Piraka are. We'll start with Radak. He has the power to adapt to anything that's thrown at him. Anybody familiar with Warhammer 40k might think of the Tyranids, and that's basically what's going on here. He can adapt to anything that significantly knocks him down. Aside from this, he can also shape Earth, he can turn specific areas into quicksand as well, and he has infrared vision. Next we have Thok. He has what's known as Spellbinder vision. This means that his laser eye power is basically that when he zaps someone, they just go... He also has the power of ice, of course. And most significantly, he can just make matter come to life. Like, there's a scene later where he summons a bunch of trees and rocks to just form into creatures and attack other people. There's a point where he literally just kind of considers bringing a mountain to life. Thok is on that evil druid shit in a major way. His power is kind of my favorite. Moving on! The power creep in this storyline is just insane. Next we have Avak. Avak's eyes give him X-ray vision and telescopic vision. Okay, so remember when I told you Avak got recruited to the Dark Hunters because he had imprisoned another Dark Hunter at one point? Avak's power is that he can create a prison from his mind that's specifically tailored to whatever foe he's fighting. Like, at one point he traps a Toa of air in a vacuum chamber. Badass. Super OP. Moving on to Haken. Haken has the power of fire, lava, etc., and his eyes have heat vision. His main power, however, is this thing called a mental blast. The way it's described in the lore is that he basically makes it hurt to think. Like, it's just this inescapable, indescribable pain. All conveniently located inside your own head, which is a deeply relatable feeling. Anyway, Vizok's powers are very fun. His laser eye ability is called Impact Vision, which basically means that he can punch you just by looking at you. And his power is that he can basically duplicate powers that he's hit with for a short period of time. I really like him just because it seems like the exact kind of character that I would play in D&D just to fuck with people. Moving on to our final boy, Zaktan. Zaktan just has standard laser vision. He can just go pew 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 pew. I'm not sure what his powers were before the Shadowed One turned him into a swarm of protodytes, but that's kind of just his thing now. Which honestly is like super awesome. Like in the lore, there's just so much stuff he does with it that is just really fucking cool. There's a reason he's the leader. He is definitely the scariest one in terms of what he can do. There's a point where he just flies into somebody's mouth and suffocates them from the inside, basically. It's like, it's fucked up. Bug Boy, pretty fucking metal. And that's it for the- oh no, wait, what the fuck are you doing here? So after working for the Dark Hunters for literally 5,000 years, they start to get a little tired of it. Zaktan eventually decides that he wants the Shadowed One's job. They all agree to follow his plan for mutiny under two conditions. One, they leave Avak out of it because they just all don't trust him for some reason. The second condition is that they all split power evenly, which they all know is bullshit because they're just gonna all try and kill each other once they get power anyway, and everyone thinks that they can beat everybody else, so, you know, like, whatever. So they raid the Shadowed One's stronghold. However, the inside is laid out like Northern Virginia, and they get hopelessly lost inside. And they then get cornered by the terrifying motherfucker known as Darkness. I'll do a separate video on him, he's fucking awesome. They're brought in front of the Shadowed One, and they immediately sell out Zaktan as the mastermind behind the whole thing. As punishment, the Shadowed One uses his eye beams to turn Zaktan into a swarm of bees, and just tells him to remember, and then just keeps them around in the organization. Scared of nothing and no one. So we fast forward approximately another 2,000 years, and for these guys it's been pretty much business as usual. They remain the Shadowed One's bitches, but Zaktan's gotten a lot better at managing the bees that he is. There has been one major change in the outside world, however. We find ourselves in the time period after Metro Nui's fall, and after Time Trap, meaning that the Brotherhood of Makuta and the Dark Hunters are currently at war. Since the war began, Rudaka's been selling information on the Brotherhood of Makuta to the Dark Hunters. I told you she wasn't dead. She tells Zaktan that there's going to be a raid on the Dark Hunter's stronghold. And Zaktan's like, wait, why? Because as much as the Brotherhood of Makuta might want to destroy the Dark Hunters, taking the island of Odina has no strategic value whatsoever. The island's in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, and the Shadowed One could just fuck off if he wanted to. But Rudaka explains that this actually used to be a stronghold for the Brotherhood of Makuta, and there's something of incredible value here. And something clicks for Zaktan. I should probably sleep soon. So the raid begins as a horde of Vizorak begin attacking the stronghold walls, and Zaktan immediately just disappears. Like he's just nowhere to be found. And that's because Zaktan has made his way back into the stronghold, and he's making his way as deep inside as possible. He's basically using his prototypes to like check in between rocks to try and find secret passageways. He eventually finds himself in this weird room. It seems like it hasn't been touched in a while, and there's a good chance that the Shadowed One doesn't even know that this is here. Zaktan's studying the walls, and there's like inscriptions on it that make absolutely no sense whatsoever. He can make out bits and pieces of words and some whole words, but everything is just scrambled and just this weird gibberish. And then something happens. The walls start to shift and rearrange. The gibberish carved into the walls starts shifting around and actually like making sense. And within a matter of seconds, Zaktan gets the entire plot of the next 3 years spoiled for him. Like he sees everything. This is Makuta's entire plan from its very inception. Like Makuta had been planting seeds for his master plan way before the Great Spirit even fell asleep. This actually relates to the MacGuffin that Haken and Vizok stole way earlier. What they stole was known as a Makoki Stone, or Keystone. Inscribed on that stone was a detailed list of every member of the Brotherhood of Makuta, and a bunch of other really crucial information to that organization's functioning. Now bear in mind, this was from 7,000 years in the past, when the Toa and the Brotherhood of Makuta were still on good terms. And the Brotherhood of Makuta was considered a very reputable organization. But the Toa at this point clearly suspected that they were up to shit, and they were right. Zaktan's first reaction is obviously like, holy shit, this is bug fuck. And his next reaction is, well, this is an unstoppable tidal wave of evil. I do not want to be standing against this. And he figures, if I can't beat him, might as well join him. So right then and there, he resolves to find a way to forcefully insert himself into Makuta's plans. Because he doesn't want to, like, you know, die. Without telling his other Skakdi friends exactly what he saw, because he wants to kind of keep that under wraps, just, you know, for himself, he convinces them all to just desert the Dark Hunters because they'd be better off somewhere else. And on their own. They're all kind of in agreement that this is the best idea because, like, they just saw this gigantic Brotherhood of Makuta raid happen and they're like, I'm not throwing my life away for the fucking Dark Hunters, fuck that shit. So they desert the organization, thereby putting a price on their head that can only be paid in their blood. And they adopt the gang name Piraka, which essentially is implied to be, like, an incredibly heinous curse, like, close to the N-word. But, you know, the NWA did it, so... And with that, we're very close to the present day, but not quite there. There's a little bit of very weird backstory left. God, my hair is insane. Zaktan has convinced the group to desert, and they're all just sitting in a boat, canoeing in the general direction of somewhere. And I don't know exactly how the geography of this works, but they wind up at Makuta's lair, where they find the destroyed armor of Spooky Ghost Man. Radak picks up the Mask of Shadows, but he yells at him so loud that he throws it into the ocean. Now, the rest of the gang's examining the armor, and something's weird about it. It's just completely empty. Like there's no organic tissue inside or anything. It's just a hollowed out suit of armor. Everybody's trying to like figure out and speculate on what happened, and then Radak just says, well, what if he never had any organic tissue to begin with? What if he was just like a hollow suit of armor? And everybody briefly looks at him like he's crazy, and then they're like, wait a second, that's not entirely improbable. Then they suddenly all have a collective epiphany. They have to go to Voya Nui and find the Mask of Life. What are those two things? Nobody knows, but they gotta do it!
None of them notice the strange green gas floating above them. It's spooky season, bitches.
Balls. The gang have no time to ponder their very strange epiphany because they are immediately beset by very large crabs. You remember the Manus from like episode 2? Yeah, these are that, but they're bigger. So they run for their fucking life, naturally. Until they make it outside into the blinding sunlight. And the crabs have stopped following them for some reason. They find themselves very suddenly on this incredibly beautiful island that of course they all hate because they're all dead inside. This is the island of Mutiny, in case that wasn't already obvious. And what should they spot at the shoreline? But 6 Toa canisters. And they realize this would be the perfect mode of transportation to Voya Nui. In fact, what they're gonna do is they're gonna go there and pretend to be Toa, so that they'll have an easier time getting at the Mask of Life. Genius plan. So they all hop in the canisters and they're off. Now y'all at home are probably thinking, wow, that was all awfully convenient. Stumbling upon Makuta's armor, getting chased by crabs until they wind up on the island and just find Toa canisters.
Mom says it's my turn to play Xbox.
So I want to talk about Makuta's mental influence. Previously, all of the Piraka had implanted in their minds that they had to go to Voya Nui and get the Mask of Life, even though none of them had any idea what that meant. Except for maybe Zaktan. But honestly, I'm pretty sure that Makuta's influence over Zaktan predates them finding his armor. I don't remember if this gets confirmed in the lore or not, but it's at the very least a suspicion that I have. Just because everything from them winding up at his lair, to them getting chased out onto the island by the giant crabs, to them just finding 6 perfect Toa canisters there, to then having the outlandish idea to pretend to be Toa, like, that's kind of too perfect. Like, Makuta had to have known that there were 6 dudes headed to his lair already. And he had to know that well in advance. My suspicion is that it all started when Zaktan found the secret room in the Dark Hunter's stronghold. Or maybe even earlier. I mean, the epiphany of him finding the room in the first place is a little weird. I don't know. God damn it. Okay, so I forgot something really, really important. When they were snooping around Makuta's lair, Radak found a weird staff. And of course, being the lumbering, genocidal jackass that he is, he basically says, I wonder what this button does. And zaps Vizok with it. Up until now, Vizok had been kind of a powerhouse of the group. Not only was he very strong, but he was also pretty smart. All of that disappears, however, as Vizok is split in half. This is Vizon. His name is the Matoran word for double, I think. And if anyone in the Bionicle universe was going to be voice acted by Mark Hamill, this would be the guy. Everyone's first thought is, of course, should we kill him? To which Vizon responds very appropriately by yoinking the staff and running for his goddamn life.
So long, suckers!
And then the whole thing with the crabs happens, yada yada yada. Vizok is now incredibly fucked up. Most, if not all, of his cunning and brains got transferred into Vizon, and now all he's got left is roid rage. This is so sad. Vorzak, play Despacito. Alright, it's time to introduce you to a new island. This island's called Voya Nui. It's in the shape of a huge crescent with a large basin in the middle, and it sucks. It's completely barren, except for like a small strip of green along a certain part of the island. And there's also a giant volcano in the middle that periodically erupts. The few Matoran that live there spend most of their time scrounging for food. 1,000 years ago, Voya Nui was more egg-shaped. And like Metro Nui, it was also underground, sort of, maybe. But when the Great Cataclysm happened, what was essentially the crust of the island burst up out of the underground and wound up on the surface, on the same plane as Mata Nui, essentially. Man, this whole underground situation is going to be really weird to explain when the time comes. So yeah, that's basically what Voya Nui is. It's a shithole. But Max, what happened to the other part of the island that's also underground? You know what I'm going to say. You know exactly what I'm going to say. Also, the Matoran look weird as fuck. Anyway.
This is a bucket.
We're going to spend some time talking about the Voya Nui Matoran today. Also, no, not all of my builds for these guys are going to be fully accurate, but it doesn't fucking matter because they're weird as shit anyway. Now, aside from the fact that all of these characters are built different, you might also notice that they all have weapons, which honestly is pretty weird for Matoran. And all these weapons have powers, too. Like, the closest we got to that with the other Matoran is that maybe they had, like, an ice pick or a hammer or, you know, at best a disc launcher. But these can, like, shoot bolts of energy and shit. Like, the guy with the least powerful weapons is probably Piraka, and his claws can still dig through solid metal. That's nothing to sneeze at. Something else to note is that there's a bit of a scale creep when it comes to the Bionicle sets. What that means is, though they're clearly not the same height, in the lore, these two are actually the same height. This might be a bit more accurate of a representation, which means that these Matoran are very small. There are very interesting reasons for all of these things, but we'll get to that. I'm keeping the bucket. So I'm going to actually introduce you to the Matoran today. This right here is Dalu. She has anger issues, and her tools are actually really fucking cool, because they're basically an enhance ability spell. Dalu can use her weapons to target people and enhance one or more of their senses or abilities to basically just make their brain go, ah! Or briefly enhance their speed way the fuck too high to make them trip. Very useful powers. Next we have Piraka. Piraka has anxiety. He's honestly one of the cutest characters ever. Whenever he gets nervous, he like sharpens his claws as a nervous habit. I love him. He's so special. As mentioned previously, his claws can rip through solid metal. Not the most OP thing, but it's pretty cool. Next we have Velika, and this build is like substantially different from the original one, but I just kind of had fun with it. He has little drills that can be used as precision crafting tools, and he speaks mostly in riddles.
There once was a man from Nantucket.
Oh, he's also just pretending to be a Matoran. He's actually a god. There's nothing under the bucket. This is Kazi, and yes, this is pretty much the exact build of this character. As you may have noticed, this build is very similar to the Turaga Lacan build that you could get in that Duracell battery pack. God, Bionicle is weird sometimes. Kazi is an incredibly direct, sarcastic asshole, and really has no time for Velika's bullshit riddles. I really like him. As weapons, he uses 2 tuning forks that he slams together to piss off music majors. Next we have Garen, who leads the resistance against the Piraka. On an island like Voya Nui, where there's no Turaga, different Matoran kind of step into leadership positions. That's his type. He's a dope dude. And when he taps his blades together, he can shoot a pulse bolt that gets stronger the longer it flies. Finally, we have Balta. I like his build a lot because it's surprisingly posable. Balta is Garen's right-hand man, and he's like a kind of a tinkerer sort of inventor dude. He's also pretty chill. His blades can repel people's attacks. He basically has a portable Uno reverse card. Pretty dope stuff. I want to make another Vaki shelf. So the Piraka arrive on the island and are immediately approached by the indigenous Matoran. These Matoran have never seen Toa before. So imagine you come home and your parents are like, oh, we got you a dog, and it's a crocodile. They're a little confused as to why the Toa don't seem to have masks and have spines and, like, teeth. Like, what? Even though these Matoran have never seen a Toa before, they still catch on relatively quickly that something's amiss. In order to win the Matoran's trust, Haken and Avak create, like, a weird stone lava monster that they then pretend to defeat. But again, it doesn't, like, quite work. And then Zaktan immediately is like, we have to drain the volcano! And all the Matoran are just like, what the fuck? Then Zaktan starts supplying his friends with launchers that shoot balls full of that weird green mist we were talking about earlier. And they start shooting the Matoran with them and turning them into slaves. And now there's just a bunch of mindless Matoran building a stronghold and draining a volcano. Only these 6 manage to escape, and the resistance begins. Man, if you thought the last arc was long, this one's gonna get ridiculous. Back in Metro Nui, Duma has been conversing with the other Turaga. I promise he's not actually that much taller. And he says that he's come to the conclusion that after years of staring at the underground stars, he's realized that Matanui's not just asleep. He's dying. For those of you just tuning in, that means God himself is dying. But they've also figured out that the one way to solve this is to acquire the Mask of Life, which is on a mysterious island called Voya Nui. The Toa Nuva are assembled, and it's agreed that Toa Nuva will stay behind on Metro Nui to guard the Matoran, while the rest of the Toa Nuva will go to Voya Nui and get the Mask of Life. The Toa get ready to embark on Toa canisters, which they just have there for some reason. The Toa are shipped off, and the general attitude is, we don't know if it'll work, but it better! The Turaga come to the unanimous conclusion that they cannot tell the Matoran about this, because it would probably cause an insane amount of panic. So they're just gonna let the Matoran rebuild their sacred city, oblivious to the fact that it may all be for nothing. Grim! Look, I did a Liwa recolor! The Toa Nuva arrive on Voya Nui and almost immediately run into the Piraka. I mean, they faced down Makuta before, how badly could this possibly go? Oh no! My air katana! It's broken! Radak shatters one of Liwa's air katanas and some of his bones. Kopaka gets trapped in one of Avak's mind prisons. Zaktan knocks Tahu out by using his swarm powers to fly under his armor and just put him into an indescribable amount of pain. Haken uses a series of mental blasts to turn Gali into a drooling wreck. Pohatu is defeated similarly. Onua is the last to fall, defeated by Vizak. And that's essentially how the battle goes. It's a really one-sided TKO. I remember reading this at like age 9 and being like, oh my fucking god, they're all gonna die. And it really looks like that's exactly what's gonna happen. Zaktan orders the other Piraka to strip the Toa of their masks and Toa tools and to throw their bodies into the volcano. And that's how the first book ends. 6 of Matanui's finest warriors defeated by the Invisalign bandits. Fuck.